Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm
What?
going to give people a few more minutes to join. Hey, Bjorn, you made it.
Yeah, I finished on Saturday. It
All
was
right.
the worst. Been the worst drought for 70 years, I think. So so this wasn't any good at all.
Oh, no. I'm sorry to hear that.
But to look at it on the positive side, it was less fuel consumed and no dry costs. So no, but it's a bad income in the end.
Yeah. Oh,
But
man.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Luckily, I do IT on the side.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So what were you farming again?
Now it's oats. So it's oats or wheat, that kind of stuff. Because I'm not doing any animals or that kind of stuff. Because you have to be on the farm all the time, and I like to be able to move when I want to move, and it's okay for a week or two in the spring and in the autumn,
Yeah.
but not all year, every day.
Yeah. Full-time job to take care of animals, right?
Yeah. So I'm married, and that is more than enough. It's a full-time job that as well.
Yeah. Cool. I think we can get started. Well, first of all, actually, before we start, is anyone new to the study group that would like to introduce themselves?
I was here last week, but I'll introduce myself. I'm Jeremy. I'm from Microsoft Azure. I work with Carolyn, and I used to work with Aaron.
Hello. Who else? Anybody else want to introduce themselves?
Go ahead, Jessica.
Sorry, I couldn't hear anything for a minute, so I'm not sure. I hopped on.
Okay, go for it.
Y'all were saying anything. Not sure what we're doing for introductions. I'm Jessica. I work as a SRE at a company called Reactive Ops. We do DevOps and Kubernetes consulting. Before that, I was a full stack web developer doing Python and Angular stuff. I'm learning Go because like everything in Kubernetes world is Go, and I'm really excited to like build tooling around for it. But also, I'm mostly just trying to debug different services that I use. I have to read Go, so it's been pretty challenging not being able to just jump in and do that. So it's kind of like a really needed skill, but also it's a little bit of a bummer because I moved from a development job where I was writing code to like an SRE job, which you're supposed to be writing code, but I don't write that much code. So I really miss it. And on Twitter, I joined this thing like 100 Days of Code. So I'm like writing Go every day. And it's been a total blast and just like fulfilling that little missing piece in my heart to write code on a daily basis.
I have a quick shameless plug. If you are ever up for live coding, this is an awesome venue to do that. So if and when, you're welcome to put yourself on the agenda.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm going to do some of that today if there's time. So wish me luck. Okay, anybody else?
Hi, so my name is Carrick. I've been attending, I guess, the past 2 weeks. And like you, Jessica, I am primarily a software engineer, but when I joined the company I work for now, I got shoved into an SRE role. And I was basically pushing configs and troubleshooting stuff in the middle of the night. And I wasn't really fulfilling my passion. I was able to switch at my company to another SRE role that we actually develop and maintain our own software. So I waited 1.5 years to do that, and it was a mistake. I should have done it sooner. But definitely, I encourage you to see if your company has the same opportunity, because I was completely unfulfilled, just supporting someone else's software. I have ideas, I want to implement them, and open source is a great venue for that. But sometimes you want to do it professionally. So I don't know if your company has that. I was very grateful my company did and allowed me to switch over. So I work at LinkedIn. I've been here for almost 5 years. My company recently got acquired by Microsoft. About 4.5 years ago, when I joined the team, I decided to write some stuff in Go, and I brought Go to LinkedIn. And now there's quite a few engineers, a couple hundred, that are working on Go at LinkedIn. I'm not the one who really was the force that brought Go to LinkedIn. I have to say one of my coworkers was the one that, after I developed the first piece of software, he really pushed and said, look what you can do in Go compared to Python. And it's easy to do a naive implementation and get performance that's thousands of times better than in Python. So because of my coworker's ability to evangelize and the work that he did and a lot of work that I did, we're now doing a couple of seminars next week at LinkedIn to teach other SREs how to write software in Go. So I'm very excited about that.
Awesome. Oh, and Jessica, was it you on the Slack channel? You were asking about reflection. Was that you? Cool.
Yeah, it was. But we can table that for another week. I mean, I know the agenda's full.
It's not, well, I don't know if it's full either, but at the very least, let's talk about it next week.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. Other introductions? Everybody more or less know other people, sort of? Okay. All right. If you want to give an introduction later, feel free, or if you're not comfortable with it, totally cool too. So there are 3 things on the agenda right now. Carolyn, I think yours is an announcement-ish kind of thing. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. I just want to put this out there. If anyone is going to GopherCon, there's space in the Beginner Go workshop that Johnny Berquist is leading on TAing. It's the day before GopherCon starts. And then on the last day of GopherCon, we're doing Community Day. And that's free. Anyone can join and participate. And we'll be working on Athens and getting ramped up on, I don't know, a whole bunch of different open source projects in Go, if you're interested.
Coolio. For those who don't know about GopherCon, I put a link into the agenda, and I put the link to the agenda into the Zoom chat. So just so if you're not familiar or anything like that, just click on that link and go check out what GopherCon is. It's fun. If you're not going, totally cool too. We can do kind of like a recap of what happened there in one of these the week after GopherCon. And also, Carolyn mentioned Athens. Carolyn, can you give like a 2-sentence summary or something quick about what it is?
You're so sneaky because Athens your project. Yeah. So a new feature in the Go 1.11 beta is the ability for us to finally deal with things disappearing off the internet or people force pushing weird changes. And the Go, like when you type Go get or Go build or whatever, it'll be able to understand how to talk to a proxy instead of going to like GitHub directly. And it kind of protects you from like left pad problems. Go bin data was a big one that happened earlier this year. And then there's also going to be a registry as part of Athens so that we can kind of say, this is my package, I prove it's me, and there's a safe way for people to pull things down without worrying that it's somehow changed or whatever. And it'll be friendly for enterprises too, so they can host their own things.
Awesome. And if there's time, I'm going to be doing some coding on that project today. So we've got another piece here, fast directory, I can't talk today, fast directory traversal for Go. I don't know who put that on the agenda, but if you did, would you like to talk about, oh, Carrick, yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I guess I was going to share screen and go from there. Is that the normal way of doing this?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So let me figure out how to share screen here. I'm sorry, I've never done it with this meeting.
All good.
The big green button at the bottom of your toolbar.
Oh, you had to make it so obvious, right? I think I'm going to go and just do to do desktop, and tell me if that's too small or not.
Make it a little bigger.
Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. So let me see if I can scale the font.
There we go.
There we go.
Awesome.
So let's actually, this is why I should be scaling the font. Zoom. Oh yeah, duh. Control plus or Command plus. Okay. So a while back, last year I was working on DEP, and we were, Sam and I were trying to figure out how we can walk the file system really fastly, and is fastly a word? And determine, be able to build a digest, a cryptographic digest of the file system, so we can see if anything has changed and not have to re-download dependencies every single time that you ran a command or dep ensure. So part of that process was to, I built a much faster file dependency walk that also worked on Windows. So it's called dirwalk, go dirwalk, and basically I created it because, well, it is faster than FilePath walk. It's more correct on Windows than on FilePath walk. I believe it's more easy to use, but maybe not to some people. But it is more flexible. It does give you more options. A simple usage example. I go into the details why it might be or why it is faster. I've got benchmarks here, and why it's more correct on Windows. And as far as Windows is concerned, stick with me. I really wasn't initially concerned with Windows as well when I first did it, and that was a huge mistake because Windows are a large part of our ecosystem in the Go community, and the fact that Windows is a first-class platform to write and develop Go software on, I really think that supporting it is proper. And a lot of times, I like what the DEP project did. A lot of times it would, I don't know, someone's hitting that keyboard. A lot of times when we develop something in Go on our Unix boxes, we don't necessarily test it on Windows, and that throws people back, and it just creates more of a burden of adoption on our developer friends who use Windows. So I really think it's important to support our Windows friends. So it is easier to use than FilePath Walk on Windows, because it's going to actually give you a Windows file path with the appropriate file path joiner in the string when it calls you in the callback every single time, such as file path walk would give you this some path to file, whereas on Windows it'll give you that. So it builds that up, and it doesn't require the person using it to actually do a conversion every single time, / or from / conversion on Windows. It also handles symbolic links to directories, and FilePath Walk does not. So that is something that I believe it's very important for Windows adopters when they turn around and want to use be able to walk the file system, that it behaves correctly. It is more flexible because it does give you configurable handling of symbolic links. So you can either choose to follow them or not. Configurable sorting of directory children. That actually can speed up your processing a whole lot. If you don't need to sort your directory children, don't bother, and you just send it a flag. By default, it sorts it because that's what FilePath Walk does. But if you don't need to sort it, let's say you just want to add up all the directory items or calculate the aggregated sum of the contents of the directory, you don't need to sort it. You just want to process it. So pass it unsorted, and you can skip a lot of that sorted nonsense. You can also create a post-children callback, and that's handy. And I can show you, showed an example of that later. And we have configurable error callbacks as well. So that's where I think it's more flexible. It just gives you a little bit different API, that it gives you a little more capability to tune how you want. In terms of performance, on Linux, it is quite a bit faster than the regular FilePath Walk. You can see there in the on this particular directory set that I was doing. It was, hugely about 8 times the speed. On Mac, it was about twice the speed, if I'm not mistaken. 4, 5, 6 times, something like that. But of course, it depends from system to system. Your mileage may vary. And it does also not only does it give you a faster walk, it also gives you a faster ability to read the directory or read the directory names. So those are also library public methods that you can call. So I'm not the only one that finds it to be faster. I think this team, I don't know this development team, but a coworker pointed me to it, that Google Containers tools, they've just switched over to GoDirWalk because they found it to be twice as fast as FilePath Walk. So there is a relative good user base that's using this right now. There's a lot of cool tools that are using it, and it is actually quite fast. So it's been hammered against pretty hard over the past year or so that we've used it. And now I probably should give you an example of using it. Oh, performance. No, I talked about that. Okay, cool. Let's just let's do a simple example. Very simple. I just want to walk that directory. I give it a dir name, and then I give it a bunch of options here. The options, there's a lot of different options, and they're all well documented. The only required option is a callback, which is very similar to what FilePath Walk does. And I will give you all the options available are right. If I was smart, oh, there we go. Probably need a, are there in GoDoc, and it's all documented in GoDoc form. So the error callback, how you would use it, the default cases, the unsorted will speed you up. Something that the Google developers on that one particular team were not aware of or didn't see is the scratch buffer. You can save a tremendous amount of garbage collection if you just give it a, let's say, 64 kilobyte scratch buffer to work on, and every ensuing call, it's going to reuse that buffer and not allocate a new one for every single, every time you call it. So that's something I definitely recommend, but it's not in the example on the front because I wanted the most simple example. Here's a couple of examples. I've got a few here. Well, here's the standard library walking example. It's very straightforward, and if you want to compare that to, hold on, boom. And let's go back and compare that to using a faster form. Here's the equivalent code. So they are quite similar. Although I turned off unsorted in this example, if you turn it to true, it will be faster. You can give it a configurable error callback, and there's an example of using error callback where you determine how it should behave when it gets to an error. That was a feature request that a user did. The user said, listen, I like this, it's faster, but you know, if I do a call a directory and that directory is now gone, I don't want the whole thing to pop and explode. I want to actually keep processing. In which case, you know, the user actually is able to return skip node, and that just behaves as one would expect, possibly logging it first. So the only difference between these two really, if you look at the function signature, is the directory name there. In the FilePath Walk example, it's sending back a file info and an error. That always was very confusing because every single time you have to include this error handling in the beginning of your function. I thought that was really bizarre that the standard library does that. I'm sure it's a historical reason, but GoDirWalk does not do that. It doesn't require you to manage that. Also, the path name, as I said earlier, the path name you get back from GoDirWalk is always an OS path name, as opposed to this variable is mislabeled. It should be this is always a slash path name is what FilePath Walk will give you. So this is would always need to be converted. So it's faster, and there's a couple of simplified examples. I've got one more example to show you that I think is interesting at my work.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
What did you mean by OS path name versus slash path name?
So on Windows, the OS path name, let me go back here. The OS path name is going to have a backslash in the path names, whereas on Unix, so here's an example of a Windows path name. Sorry, when I said OS path name. On Windows, the OS path name is always going to have a backslash. I actually missaid that, and I'm sorry, maybe too much caffeine today. But the OS path name is always what you want, because on Windows, you don't want the user to be forced to actually do that conversion every single time. And so most code that handles Windows properly using the standard library turns around that one of the first thing it needs to do is it's supposed to convert what the file path walk gives you in the callback to an OS relative path name by calling filepath.from/.
Okay.
So every library that uses file path walk really should start off, check the error, convert the path name in from /, and then you can use it somehow in your program. The GoDirWalk will handle that for you. And it doesn't like do it every single, what it does is it actually builds a string for each file as opposed to creating as much garbage. It just builds that string, sends it to you, and then, you know, for foo, and then later on when it sends you bar, it just replaces the end bits with bar. So a lot less garbage there.
Gotcha. So
But if
then
it's, sorry.
The thing that you get in GoDirWalk, is the string that you get going to always have a certain type of /, like this one or this one?
So GoDirWalk will always give you the appropriate delimited path name for the operating system you're on.
I see. Okay.
Which I believe is more correct than to always give you, file path walk always gives you that. And I don't believe that's correct, because anybody who writes software on Windows would need to turn around and, or if you don't think about it, you just write software on Unix, you're going to have a problem if you build something and someone uses your library and your library is handing it slashes, but you want it to work on Windows.
I got you.
Just an added step that really ought not be there. Should have been something that I think the standard library should have done. But historical reasons aside, I think.
I mean, just to clarify, so Windows is actually a lot more tolerant about slashes than you'd think, and you can do oddball things like take // and then put on a Linux style, like Unix style path. So you could avoid like munging it. And most of the time it'll work, so a lot of people don't even bother.
Yeah.
One in the cases where it does matter, and then you're like, why does it suddenly not work on Windows?
Bingo, and then it's like a time bomb.
Not work. It just will not work in like unexpected places.
Exactly, and that's like a time bomb waiting to happen. And I think that's why I made sure that it always hands it back in a way that your program can work with it correctly without having to do that additional step. And it's not like it's calling to or from / each time, creating garbage. Whereas if you were to use file path walk, you would have to do that, and it's creating garbage along the way. This is actually not creating garbage. It reuses that same stub the whole time, and then it appends the child directory entry name. So in terms of correctness, in terms on Windows, something that I ran into early while testing this module in depth was that and in fact, I went out and bought a Windows laptop in order to run tests, because every time I would commit something for my depth thing and try to commit it into or merge it into master or put a PR out there, it would run on the automated systems and fail because I wasn't taking into account some idiosyncrasies of Windows. So I went out, bought a Windows laptop, and did all my development on there and on my Mac, and made sure it passed all the tests in both places. But I found out that when you have symbolic links to directories, on Windows, a particular directory item can have both a symbolic link flag and a directory flag, whereas on Unix it's one or the other. And so file path walk does not, first of all, it doesn't even allow you to deal with symbolic links at all, whereas this will. But this also handles them correctly when you're actually testing to see if you have a symlink in your hand. It actually handles that properly. So so for the correctness aspect, these two items is very important to me, because we want to make sure our Windows developers also can use software that enables them, not sits there and makes their life misery when they turn around and use your library and it doesn't work properly, and then they have to debug it, and that was annoying. So and a lot of times they won't even know, because how many people are going to go out and buy a Windows machine and debug libraries on their Windows machine? Okay.
I don't know. Microsoft makes some pretty good laptops now. Shameless plug.
Well, now that I find myself as a proxy Microsoft employee, it's like, all right, I'm investing in my own future, right? And I'm not complaining. I've actually been very happy. The only thing I don't like about my particular machine is it's not a Microsoft machine. It's made by a different manufacturer, and the keyboard is off to the side, so I have to type at an angle like this. It's really annoying because it's got the number key and anyways. So let me, somebody sent me a notification on my work. So let me turn off notifications so I don't sit here and today.
Sorry, that was me. I was trying to figure out which Carrick was Carrick on Gopher.
Oh, no, that was actually oh, okay, that was you. It's just Carrick. I found that it's a fairly unique name. I don't find many other Carricks around.
There's 2 of you on Gophers, that's all.
I know, they're both me, but I opened up my first account 3 years ago when I went to the second to GopherCon. My company wouldn't let me go the first one because whatever. But by the second one, definitely we're now a presence at GopherCon, or we're at least sending about 20 different engineers to it annually. But at the second GopherCon, there's only 2 of us, and I opened up a Slack handle, and I couldn't recover that for whatever reason, so I had to create a new one.
Whoops.
Okay, no worries. So, okay, so how did we make it faster? How did I make it faster? And I would call this not just how did I make this faster, but how does one go about making software that runs on Windows and Unix environment and turn around and try to make it faster? The first thing I'm going to address is the fact that if you look at on the left screen, I've got a couple of, Go makes this really amazingly easy, and I love Go for this. I turned around and created some files here, and I've got the general reader. This reads a directory, and it's a very simple little file that it's the public interface that provides a few types. And let me scroll the bottom without giving you guys vertigo. And all they do is they simply call this other private method, or not method, sorry, private function. And then the private function is actually handled in the respective underscore Unix or underscore Windows. In this case, I know it runs on the following operating system, so I put that at the top. And then I turn around and I implement the same function for both Unix and Windows. And if you see the Windows version, very similar. So Windows, all I did was I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just calling the Windows Windows calls effectively. And so there's not any speed up in Windows. It just behaves correctly. But Unix, I was able to get some speed ups. Windows, I've not invested that time in there. And I have a big note in the library. If you know of ways to make Windows faster, other than Windows System Programming 3rd edition, then please let me know, and I'm happy to take a PR. Okay, so there's one other weird feature that I had to separate out. In some operating systems, we have a Dragonfly, FreeBSD, OpenBSD, NetBSD. We've got this concept of a file no on part of the syscall directory entry. But in Linux and on Macintosh, we don't have the file no. We've got something different. We have an INO. So in this case, on Darwin and Linux, I have it this little function. All it does is it returns that particular data member. So now I've insulated it from build differences between Darwin Linux and all the other BSDs. So that's another handy tool if you're trying to write software that runs on multiple operating systems. I happened to find that out when I was developing this to traverse file systems on my BSD, one of my BSD servers. And okay, speed. Speed. Okay. I don't know how we're doing on time, and I don't want to waste your time, but I definitely want to be able to answer questions. So in terms of speed, so there's a couple of goods and bads about this. Right now, I'm making a lot of calls to syscall, and I did that because I don't know if the rest of you know, especially as a newbie, syscall is an awesome thing, but as you know, good habit is anytime you call syscall, you really need to do build options. I forgot what they're called, but you really need to insulate yourself against, well, these syscall calls work on these particular operating systems, not another operating system. So anytime you have syscall, you definitely need to scope your file build down to that and provide an alternative for other operating systems you want to support, such as Windows. Syscall is, however, kind of frozen and deprecated for future development. And what is more, what's recommended to use now is this right here. And I forgot the blog post handle, but I could find it. But because of trying to maintain Syscall and operating systems making changes, we need to maintain a backward compatibility in the Go, the standard library for Go. A lot of this stuff has moved over into Unix and Windows. So one to-do item I have for myself is going ahead and adopting the Unix and Windows aspects of Syscall as opposed to using Syscall here. But we know that these calls are always going to be there. So until I need to make those changes, I do have backward compatibility and I'm not concerned. There is some use of unsafe in here, but I think we'll see where that happens. So the read directory entries, when I looked at the actual OS, if I look at the OS standard library, which is an excellent library, there's a lot of times where we throw data away that we need and that we could reuse. And even in file path walk, there's a lot of times where we throw a lot of data away that we should be reusing for subsequent calls. And that's basically what I did for this particular iteration. Not only did I have to fix the Windows issues or make sure I handle Windows properly, I also wanted to make sure that I'm doing it faster. And I'm also and one of those ways is eliminate a lot of garbage if possible and stop querying data from the operating system and throwing it on the floor. Query that same data and throw it on the floor. So that basically I did some research on the best way in Unix and the best way in Windows to read directories and how to process them. And I found some information on how to do that. And I don't throw that data away. And that's like, unless I dive in and did a code review, I don't know if that's what people want to go into. There's my little unsafe going on here. I think the bottom line is find out, and I did a lot of this. I used flame graphs, and I would run this. I would run my this library against a tool that built flame graphs that I could explore with SVG on my browser, SVG graphs in my browser, and it really showed where the operating system was being called and asked to do the same thing over and over. And then from the standard library, I looked at the standard library, saw how it was doing things. And I love the fact that the standard library is there for you to inspect. It really seems like the Unix way of doing things. You can go in there, you can look at it, you can learn from it, and then you can, here's a different way of doing it that might be better. And so that's kind of what GoDirWalk is meant to be, a better way of walking through your file system that is less, more efficient, if you will.
Awesome.
And that's what this does. So I'm happy to talk about, like, go into code reviews and talk about design choices. One of my favorite libraries, GitHub Package Errors, for anyone who likes to be able to handle errors better. But that's basically it.
Cool. So I have one comment, Carrick. I feel like this would make an amazing talk, and Carolyn just told me that too. So you should talk to Carolyn, because I think she can help you make this a talk that you could give if you're interested in that.
Oh, I'd love to. I really enjoy talking and teaching and working with people. That's why that evangelizer at my company asked me to be one of the workshop teachers to help people learn Go. So I do love it, and I'd be happy to do that because I really think growing our community is something that brings joy to me.
Cool. Sorry to call you out there, Carolyn, but I think you could help him a lot. And
that's cool. I'm going to follow up with you, Carrick, okay?
Cool thing, Carolyn. Thank you.
Cool. So yeah, if there's a lot of cool stuff here, Carrick, so maybe you could schedule a code review for like the next study group or whenever you're available next, because this would be awesome to dive into more. So
one thing I will point out is someone asked and created an issue, why don't you submit this to the Go standard library as a PR? And I had to think about it, and I came up with an answer, and I think I would love to do this as a PR to the standard library. But here's the key thing. My actual reason for not doing so is inertia. I have no idea how much energy it would take to work through the red tape of submitting a change to the Go standard library, only to have it rejected because of reason X or Y. Again, I spent a lot of time working on DEP, and I really believed in DEP, and then it felt like the carpet was pulled out from under me, and that's a whole different political talk. I don't want to get in that. But then I feel like, here's a library, it does what it does, and I really, I would love to be able to submit this to the standard library. I'm really not sure how one goes about that. And I know, Carolyn, you did a demonstration 2 weeks ago. Hey, here's how to build Go, and it was cool, and I did it, and I had fun. But anyways, any thoughts from you guys, I'd appreciate it.
I'd love to work with you on how we could split up what you've done and submit the pieces of it upstream into the standard library that I know that they would be more likely to accept. I mean, I agree. I understand exactly why you didn't submit it. But I think we can get some of the really unique pieces that you did, like the buffer, and actually get that upstream and help out what's in there. It'd be fun to collaborate on if you have time.
I'd love to, and because I think everybody could benefit from it. There's parts of it I think that the API provides more flexibility, and I think that that's very important. And we can do some performance improvements, but I think it would have to, like a new API would sit awkwardly next to the existing API. And I'm not sure how that should be approached. So let's talk afterwards and figure that out.
Perfect.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Really cool, by the way. Just so
Thank
you know.
you. Thanks for the feedback.
This is really awesome. I agree. So do folks have questions for Carrick? When should we start using this, Carrick, in our programs?
Right now.
It's already being used in production at LinkedIn for for a year. It's been used in production, but I think you should use it now. I think it's a lot easier to use, and if you write code that you want to run on Windows, I really think you should be looking at GoToWalk, and I am happy to help anyone convert. Until I guess I'm happy to help anyone figure out how to use it. Send me a note on Slack. If you're not on Slack, open up an issue on the GitHub repo. I'm going to paste the GitHub. Well, no, I can't really. I'll paste it in here because I don't know if.
It's open for editing if you want to put it in the agenda.
Oh, well, duh. It's already in the agenda.
Oh, perfect.
So there, it's already in the agenda. Open up an issue, ask me, hey, I'm trying to use it, and I'm happy to help you. Especially if you're trying to be able to support Windows environments, because I think that's important for our community to do.
Sweet. All right, one last call for questions before we move on. Going once?
Quick question. What was it like doing this in open source at LinkedIn? Was it fairly straightforward? You just do a personal project and then you can use it internally, or is it something you use internally and then push out?
So I love that question, and I want to answer it properly. So when I left my last job, I really want to make sure I don't move to a company that does not support open source. So on one hand, there are companies that make you sign an agreement that if you develop something on your own time, they own the IP for it. And I abhor that and will not work for a company that does that. LinkedIn, I found out before I worked there that they don't mess, open source and your professional work are two different things. So again, I developed this on my own time after hours because I didn't want to create an improprietary whatever. Sorry, I can't know English. I didn't want to create a bad atmosphere or, where people think, well, IP and stuff. So I just did this on my own time when I developed for the DEP project. And then it became obvious that this capability needs to be in its own open source library. So I took it out of DEP. I put it in its own project itself, and then I turned around and I started working on it, took a PR from one person and started folding in some improvements and enhancements and stuff. So it wasn't related to LinkedIn, this project. There are other projects at LinkedIn that I have done open source, and I've gotten very good reviews on it. And LinkedIn is very open to open sourcing software. They really want to encourage that. And there's another project primarily that I'm working on at LinkedIn that my managers have really asked me to open source for a long time, and I simply have not done so because of inertia. Quite honestly, I'm working on a different project on my own time, and I want to get that project finished, and so I really don't want to take extra time trying to, get this other project open sourced.
It's great to see managers actually coming out and encouraging you to open source things.
Oh, absolutely. But it's a cultural thing. Not every company is going to support that. And that was like a prereq for me to work for any company. I want to be able to support open source, because open source, I mean, how many businesses rely on open source but don't let you contribute back to it? That's kind of ridiculous and hypocritical.
Sweet. Well, that was really awesome, Carrick. I would love to hear more about that, like see more code, do code review, live demo, whatever.
I've got so many libraries in my repo because I love this stuff. And what I'm working on now is I just did a B+ tree. What actually got, I think Samuel asked me initially to talk about Golf, which is Go long flags. It's a drop-in replacement for the flag standard library, except it processes long flags correctly. So one of my biggest frustration is I don't want a single hyphen and then the flag name. I want to do GNU and POSIX style flags, and that's what Golf does. So I mentioned it last week. It's in the it's there. It's a drop-in replacement. It does both short and long flags, but it doesn't require you to change how you architect your command line program from just a flag, use of the flag standard library. It pretty much just changes how you give it options.
Sweet.
So I've got lots of little things like that, and I'm happy to, if anyone looks at something, is scurrying around there, I'm very happy to talk about anything or just answer questions on it. Please reach out.
Awesome. Cool. All right. I am going to take the next 10 to 15 or so minutes to show a little bit of Athens code in the form of some live coding. We'll see what we can get done because it's not a lot of time. But here goes. I'm going to share my screen here. There we go. Oh, it's up. Can people see this issue? Can anyone not see it?
It looks great.
Okay. Cool. So I'm going to try and hide all the Zoom machinery, if that's even possible. Probably not. Hide video panel. All right. I'm not going to bother with it. Yeah, so Carolyn mentioned what Athens is. We're basically trying to build a server for the new dependency system starting in Go 1.11. So like you won't have to download, you can choose not to download your dependency code from GitHub or other VCS systems. And you can instead download it from a place where like it won't disappear. Even if someone like deletes the project, like Carolyn was saying. So this is kind of an alpha of that. It's also a reference implementation of the protocol. So we're building it out now, and we expect to have it like running on the internet pretty soon as like a pre-alpha. So if people see it, don't rely on it being around, but it's good for testing to see kind of what's coming. So what I want to live code on today is this issue. I put a link to it, I think, in here. Yeah, issue number 138. So this issue is all about testing. And I'll show kind of how testing works in this library, or excuse me, in this project. And then also that kind of like testing strategy is based on another open source library that you can kind of apply anywhere. It's basically a way to do test suites in Go, which is something that's kind of has been missing for a while. And now that we have it, it's really, really nice, at least for me. So I'm going to go in here. There's a chat going on. What would people say? Oh, okay. If someone has questions, just speak up and interrupt me because I don't have the chat up right now. So what we're testing here is some routes, meaning HTTP routes. So if we head over to the repo, this is the Athens repository. And I'm actually, before I do anything else, I'm going to make a new branch. Let me go up here. So you can watch me fumble around on the Git command line. I'm going to grab all the code from upstream, make a branch called proxy tests, branch off of upstream master. Okay, so now we've got our new branch. This is not related to Go at all, simple Git stuff, which I always fumble with, so you can enjoy watching me fumble with it. And then if we head over to cmd/proxy, we check out our main function, and then I think most folks know this is the entry point to our app, really to any Go application. We're not really doing too much in main. Really, we're putting together this thing called an app, and then we're calling serve. Serve does what you would expect. It runs a web server. But the real meat of everything is in actions.app. So I'm just going to jump into here. So actions.app is here. It creates this thing called an app, a pointer to an app. And by the way, Buffalo is a web framework that I love. I wish I could go way more into it today, but another time I certainly, or someone else certainly can. So anyway, yeah, we're creating an app. There's a bunch of stuff going on here. Like we're connecting to a storage system. We're doing stuff with background workers here. We're setting up like private encrypted sessions, doing some SSL stuff, blah, blah, blah. We have distributed tracing. We do authentication, tons of stuff. I'm going to jump down to what we care about, though, and that is here, add proxy routes. So if we go into there, this is where we actually define HTTP routes. So here's one. This is the most obvious one. If you go to /, kind of like the home page, this is what one of the handlers looks like. This one's super simple. Basically, return HTTP 200 and then render some HTML. Index.html is just a template. It's just some HTML with some special template directives in it. So I'm gonna go back, and down here, this is the one, another one that we care about. If we head over to .register handlers, you can see here there's a bunch more of these app.get calls. So we've got app.get path list. You can see there's a regex in there, and then /@v and then /list. And you'll see kind of this pattern over and over again. Latest has the same deal except @latest. There's a version .in or .info, so on and so forth. There's a .ma, there's a .zip, and these are all specific to Go modules. So for today's live coding, we don't really need to understand what each one does so much as we need to be able to test it. So let's jump into how we do testing. So the first deal here with testing is we've got this thing called an action suite. And action suite uses this Go Buffalo /suite library, which I'll try to remember to put a link to this into the agenda after this. So this struct basically just embeds this thing called a suite.action. And suite.action is constructed with this. You call suite.newAction, and you pass it that Buffalo app. That is the same app that we created in our new function. So we create our action suite, and we call suite.run, and suite.run is the thing that actually runs our whole test suite. So this right here, this function is kind of like our entry point to the test suite. And then this is really the only entry point to the test suite, actually. And then this is the thing that actually does the real work. So this is the thing that actually uses Buffalo suite to go and like run everything in the test suite. Okay, so what does a test suite look like? Sorry, what does a test look like? So I'm going to go and create a new file here called, let's just call it list_test. And we're going to create an actions package. And we're going to go and create a new function a new method on this action suite, and we're going to do a test for list. That was the one that was @v/list. So I'm going to call it func a.action suite. So we're going to have a receiver of a called a on a pointer to an action suite. And then we're going to call it test list. And this is what a function in our test suite looks like. So there's a couple rules here. It has to be what I call a method on action suite. So that means that the function signature has to basically start like this. And then the other rule is it has to start with test. The function name has to start with uppercase T, test. And that's a rule that is very similar to what the Go standard library testing package does as well. Okay, so now we've got this test list. And so now we have to figure out like what to do. So I've got 11 minutes left. I'm actually going to cut this off at 10:55 in case there's some questions. So I'm just going to start like the first couple lines of this test suite, and then we can continue it later if folks want, or next week, or kind of whatever ends up happening happens. So first thing we're going to do, Action Suite has a ton of stuff in it for us. So the first thing, and the thing that I like the most, is this thing called a.require. So a.require is how we do assertions in our tests. So we can do things like r.equal, and we can pass in like a thing that we expect and then an actual thing. So let's say we call something like this. We say result equals add 1 and 2, right? So the add is completely made up, but basically you can imagine what that function would do. It adds 2 to 1, right? So result should be 3, and we're going to make sure it's 3 by doing r equal, and our expectation is that it's 3, and the actual one is result. And that's all we have to do to test out whether add works, right? So add should return 3, and this is where we're saying that's what I expect, and if it doesn't, then this thing is going to actually fail this particular test in the suite. And the whole test framework is going to show the failure really nicely. It's going to show like the line number it failed on. It's going to show what it expected. It's going to show actually what it was. And I can even put a message at the end of this and saying something like this: add didn't work. And if the equal failed, so if result was not 3, then the test suite is even going to show that message and say, the check on line 7 didn't work. Here's what it was supposed to be. Here's what it was. And here's the message. The message was add didn't work. So this thing is kind of nice to like show a little bit more context to whoever runs the test next time. So real quick, I'm going to get into what testing this thing's actual endpoint would look like. So I'm going to close this because I go crazy when I have a ton of files open. I hope I'm not the only one. And I'm going to go into here. This is back at our register handlers function. And I happen to know that the logic we want to test is inside of this thing called list handler. Okay, so list handler does a ton of stuff. And we have kind of a hard job here because we already wrote a bunch of code, and we didn't really do test-driven design. We did like write it and don't test it at all design, which is not the best. So now my task is to go back and write tests after the fact for what list is actually supposed to be. So not the best, but the good news is I can look at least at what the output should be. So what this means here is we're going to render. This ENG is a thing that does rendering. So we want to render a string. We want to take this versions, which is a slice of strings. We want to separate those versions with a new line. Okay, so at the end of the day, whatever we get back is supposed to be a bunch of things that are in a list separated by a new line. So 2 minutes left. I'm going to show what it looks like to call this endpoint, and then how to, hopefully, if I have time, how to check the output. Okay, so first things first, we're going to make a request, and we're going to do this thing called a dot, let's say string, oops, JSON, and this is going to be a request against this endpoint. Oops. So I'm going to copy this in here. So we want to do a JSON request against slash something slash @v/list. So the module here, I'm just going to make something up. I'm going to just call this github.com/gomods/Athens, because that's the package we're doing right now. This is the project, right? And then this is the actual endpoint I'm trying to test, @v/list. Okay, so that makes a request, and the response is going to be request.get. Okay, so now we've got this response, and the response is this this package called Willy. We don't really have to know much about that. We just have to know it's a JSON response. Okay, so we've got a code in here, and then we've got a a body. So really what we want to test is we want to test the code, and we want to test, this is the HTTP response code, by the way. And we want to test the actual body, which is that thing, it's the new line separated list. So first thing we can test is the code, and we have this require package still. So we can do r.equal again, and we assume, we want to hope at least, that we get a 200 response. And the expectation is that the response.code, the response code, is going to be 200. So this reads fairly simply, right? We want the response to be 200. Now the body is a little bit more tricky. So first of all, res.body is a pointer to a bytes.buffer. I am out of time right now, so stay tuned. I will actually do this for real, and I will push it up as a PR in the repo. And I will post the PR in the Go Study Group channel so that folks can look at what does this actually look like. The PR will have like just this function in it so that you can see, you know, from top to bottom, what does it look like to test an endpoint in the Athens project, but also just generally speaking, what does it look like to test an HTTP endpoint in any project? So with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I saw that there was a ton of stuff in the chat. So if people had questions, please shoot them at me.
I've got a question, and most of us were just complimenting your coding environment there, so you can catch up later. No, it's VS Code, looks pretty awesome. The question I have is the decision to use the require package to run tests and stuff, as opposed to using like the traditional testing package in standard library. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah. So this is actually all built on top of it. And the reason I don't use the standard library testing, at least for doing checks like that, is basically I just have to write less code, and that's like my laziness. But then the other piece is I feel like it's a lot easier to read, because you got that one line, you're saying, I expect this to be equal to this. And then there's that optional message at the end. So it's nice for me, but I think it's a lot nicer for readers who would otherwise murder me in my sleep. Yeah. I hope, did I make sense there?
Yeah, it made perfect sense. Yep.
Cool. Other questions, comments? Think I'm a terrible coder? I'm bad at Git? On command line? Anything?
We love you, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Could I use this package with any app, not just those built with Buffalo?
You can use all of that stuff that I did with r.require, the equal, all that stuff. You can use that with anything outside of Buffalo. The github.com/gobuffalo/suite. You could technically use it, but it's actually really hard to kind of shoehorn it into a non-Buffalo app. But that would be an interesting thing to like explore how much you'd actually have to do to get it to work outside of the Buffalo framework. Because I'm pretty sure it could be done. It's just like,
Sounds like it would be.
not sure how. Cool. So we got 2 minutes left. Anyone have something last minute they want to talk about or show? I'll mention, come next week. We're going to do same time, same place. This is a weekly thing now. So, yeah.
One thing is, I was really interested in seeing like the live coding, and I think it's really useful to see how other people like figure out some issues on the fly, and if we can get a little session of on live coding, a little bit per, doesn't need to be long, but per Go Study group meeting, that would be awesome.
For sure. I will volunteer to do live coding. I would love other people to volunteer to do live coding as well. And you don't even have to do anything. You literally put your name on the agenda, spend like, I'm going to just say, let's keep it to 20 minutes or less. And like, if you want to walk through your development environment, great. If you've got code you want to write, that's cool too. If you want to do code reviews, get the person's permission first. If you're reviewing someone else's code, and then let's do the code review. Like totally wide open. So yeah, if you want.
I have a question.
Sure.
What if I've written some code and I'm looking for some critical review?
That's cool too. We can do that.
That's kind of cool. I would go for that.
We'll be nice.
No, exactly.
I don't want nice.
Exactly. You want nice, but not really.
No, I want tough criticism. Why did you make that choice? I want to make code better, and it doesn't get better if we tiptoe around idiosyncrasies that are really holding us back. So I really appreciate a very hard code review.
If you're not careful, you're all going to earn a very long lecture about how we can have kind code reviews while still providing interesting, useful feedback.
Oh, there's a difference between not kind and not effective. I think you can do it professionally and properly. But I don't want people to, I wouldn't want people to say, I want people to bring up issues that, their gut feeling is, oh, that just doesn't seem right. And I'm kind of curious why, not because I'm right or they're right, but let's talk about why our gut feelings are different. And I think
I just want to make sure that we use language that doesn't scare any of our new people.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We will be kind. We will not just beat people up or laugh at them or assume that they know things. It's two-way conversations when we do code reviews.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was just talking to Aaron about that, I think last week or the week before, about how hard it can be to get that direct feedback about code that you want that sort of deep dive into. So I'll definitely be sharing some code that I may not think is very good, and Aaron can go through it and tell me what can be better.
Well, one thing though is like, as soon as you share code to be reviewed by a lot of people, you're already on another step, because you're on the step of like, you're exposing yourself to learning, and everybody appreciates that everybody's there. And I think, you show your little where you are, and for you, maybe a little problem seems easy for other people. So you're going to be helped a lot, I think. That's how I see it.
So let's do this. I actually have to go. I'm 2 minutes late for the Athens Dev meeting, but let's do this. If you are interested in doing live coding, walking through your development environment, reviewing or getting reviews, any of those things, either speak up in the Go Study Group channel in the Gophers Slack, or just plain put your name down on the agenda. Either one is fine. And we're going to try to keep them to about 20 minutes for anything. And before we do any code reviews, we're going to just talk. Carolyn, I'm going to volunteer you to just talk a little bit about like what are the best practices for doing kind code reviews that are constructive. Is that cool for folks?
Yeah.
You put it on the agenda, it'll happen.
That's right. It will. Okay, everybody. We will see you.
Thank you very much.
Same time, same place next week.
Take care, guys.
See you next week.
Bye, everybody.